I'll go ahead and get started, and please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. Happy to answer those at the end as well. So I thought I would start a little bit by explaining why the resume is of importance. At 16, 17, 18 years old, when I start to work with the students on their resume, they kind of look at me a little cross-eyed, like I'm not an adult applying for a job. So why do I need a resume? Well, the reality is we work with the students to develop the resume for several different reasons. And to be honest with you, I work with adults on building resumes as well. So giving students and working with students to develop this skill as part of the application plan and their college planning will serve them well throughout their life, because we hopefully can give them a working document that they can add and delete from as they progress through college and beyond. So we, in our process, have several different uses for the resumes. And I'll talk about those. So this just sort of gives you an overview of some of the things we'll discuss tonight about the resumes, why they're important, how you go about writing them, and how they can be used. What we really work to do is make uncommon connections to describe what you've done during your time in high school. The goal of your application, as you heard from Betsy earlier, is to use all the tools in your arsenal. So developing a comprehensive resume that clearly explains, what activities, awards, things you have participated in is one of those tools that you can use as a part of your arsenal. We'll look to discuss the difference between common and uncommon activities and how you can make those more unique. We're also going to discuss 5 traits that prove you'll be successful in college and how we go about incorporating those into your resume. And then ultimately at the end, as we did earlier, you can try and stump me with questions and I'll do the best I can to answer those. So the resume is developed and used for several different purposes within the college planning and within your college applications. So obviously the first way is as a part of your application itself. We build resumes, we work with the students to build resumes that include classes, that include honors, APs, any associations, any awards. And then we work to develop activities, and that activities could be paid work, it could be volunteer, it could be any aspect of anything that they have done in high school. It could be a hobby that they have. So we work with the students to fully try and understand who they are and how we can present them to schools. So as a part of the common application, you have an activities section. And we work with the resume to develop activities that ultimately can be copied and pasted from the resume into the common application. By doing it that way, we avoid quite a bit of error as it relates to freehand in the common application itself. In addition, many schools are now offering the opportunity to upload your resume. The common application limits you to 10 activities that you need to prioritize. So if you have the opportunity to upload a sort of more comprehensive resume as a part of your college application in the Common App, that's fantastic. And so we work with you to try and develop that. Many schools also ask you to develop, if you use a program called Naviance, which is a college planning tool that many schools use, they ask you to develop a resume within Naviance. I had a student today that said his counselor had asked him to develop his resume. And I said, well, you've already done that. I said, you've done it through our program. It's all you need is copy and paste the information into there. So he was quite excited about that. We include, for non-paid and volunteer and internships, we include that information on the resume. But in addition to that, the resume can be used for students who may want to explore things like non-paid work, volunteering, or internships over the course of their high school career. So rather than just fill out an application, you can also hand, the employer or the volunteer or the manager, you can hand them an individual resume. It also can be used if you're applying for any scholarships, if you're applying for, academic leadership, honor societies. Many of those require some type of comprehensive resume. In addition to that, we work with students when asking for letters of recommendation, which Betsy touched on earlier as being a key component, of your application, which many sort of set aside. But we work with the students to develop a letter that ultimately an email that they send to possible recommenders is, and a part of that, they attach their resume. Some teachers may know you only from being in their classroom, so it's helpful for them to see you in different ways and be able to discuss that in their recommendation letter as well. So as you can see, the resume serves multiple purposes, both for the college planning, and then we hope that the students can use it longer term as well. So this is just, there are lots of tools in your arsenal, as Betsy had mentioned earlier, and we work with you to develop what those are. And in some cases, the students may think that the activity is irrelevant, or it's just something they did, or it's just a hobby they have or whatnot. But, we try and work through those to see if in fact they could be more substantial, and included on the resume. So here's a couple of quotes that we have heard from admissions counselors and admissions offices over the course of several years. But basically, students who are not afraid to put themselves out there and maybe have a difference of opinion. They're looking for students like that. So how can we work to showcase that within a resume? It could be through an activity. It could be through what they did as a part of that activity. And we work to develop that. Grit as a passion and perseverance for long-term goals. We look for evidence of somebody who works hard, works vigorously toward challenging tasks or projects, and can overcome failure. Not all activities are maybe successful. Several students struggled this year to develop activities for their resume based on the fact that they weren't in school last year. So how can we articulate those on the resume and show that they were still a part of things? And there's definitely ways to go about doing that. And many have chosen to do things on the side on their own over the course of the last couple of years. Intellectual curiosity and enthusiasm for learning, being creative, being generous towards others, civic engagement, working hard, and open-mindedness. So these are all things that the schools are looking for when they're reviewing applications. So I'm going to ask a question of the group, and I don't know, maybe Beth can show me, or someone can tell me if anybody gets the answer right. But in looking at these aspects of your college application, which of these do you think is the most important? And I can't see the chat box, so I'm going to assume somebody's going to answer. Anybody have an answer?
I don't see anything yet.
Okay, Kayla had an answer. Anybody else? Okay, I got two GPAs.
Here we go.
Okay, good. So the answer to the question is rigor of your high school curriculum. Okay, so what courses are you taking, and what have you done as a part of those courses? There may be projects you've done, there may be activities you've participated in. So that is number one. But in addition to the rigor of your high school curriculum, they're also looking for GPA, standardized test scores. They're looking for recommendation letters, interviews, and other writing activities, assignments, essays, activities, that kind of thing. So as we said, we're really trying to put the full picture of an individual together so colleges can really see who the individual is and not just understand who they are from just the high school, curriculum or the GPA. We want to be able to show the whole student. So there's lots of things that can be listed on your resume, lots of things. And those can be included as you see in front of you. Paid work is obviously one that, and it's interesting, many students forget that they work over the summer. And so that's the first one they forget to put on there. They automatically move to athletic team or soccer or something like that. But the paid work is very important because that shows, one side of you. The non-paid work shows another side of you. It could be something you participated in at church, within your community, down the street. I have a couple of students who, do elderly care for ailing grandparents. Then there's extracurricular activities, soccer, basketball, football. It could be club, it could be within school and whatnot. Then you have your volunteering and your community leadership. And then are there any other interests you have? For example, I've had a couple of students who have started their own reselling businesses. Okay, how can we articulate that? I have others who built an 8,000 square foot garden, and then they donated the food to the food bank. I have others who have fostered puppies. Okay, Those are all very unique pieces of information that an admissions officer who's reading an application can't see anyplace else. So how do we articulate that in the resume and get that different side of the student across? And then obviously there's family responsibilities. We have several students who are, the oldest siblings. And so they're responsible for certain activities within their household and responsible for their siblings. So how can we articulate that as well? So there's lots of different things that you can put on a resume. I always say, put as much as you possibly can, want, need, have, and then we can always work to combine things or scale back or whatever that might look like. But let's put it all out there and see what we can do with it. So we know that schools are looking for 5 traits, okay? And these are those 5 traits: drive, intellectual curiosity and creativity, contribution to others, kindness, initiative, and diversity of experiences. So knowing that these are the 5 traits that schools are looking for in applicants, how do we work to have this come across through a resume? Well, that has a lot to do with how we describe the activities. So we're going to go a little bit into, how does that work? How do you describe those activities? So what is the difference between a boring activity and one that stands out? The reality is it's not about the activity itself. It's about what you accomplished as a part of that activity. So you could be a tennis player. Okay. Well, the tennis player is the activity, which is fine. And that's what we would list as your activity. But what did you accomplish while you were a tennis player? Did you face any challenges? What did you learn while you played? What did you accomplish? Did you win a certain number of matches? Those kinds of things is what we're going to portray in your what you did section. So here's an example. This is a common activity with common connections. So a common would be learned about hard work, discipline, and perseverance. Improved my teamwork for overall team success, long practice, and lots of dedication. Fairly common words, fairly common statements that ultimately could describe any activity that could be on your resume. Here's a way to take it and make it uncommon. Okay, so we've taken a common activity and we've made uncommon connections. And it's just a change in words and some adding of numbers, right? Dedicated my practice to 1,000 successful foul shot practices a week for 35 weeks. They accomplished that. Recruited 3 teammates to do the same. Okay, that's impressive. Team's foul shots improved 350% when compared to last season. Wow, that's a pretty major accomplishment. Spearheaded a Special Olympics event to teach athletes how to make foul shots. So they took that experience and they took what they accomplished and what they learned, and they spearheaded an event, all still under that same activity, but they spearheaded an event based on that. And then they raised $1,000 for Special Olympics. Numbers speak volumes in resumes as it relates to accomplishments. Not just while you're in high school, but long-term as well. As you move through work experiences and whatnot, numbers speak volumes. So the more you can quantify your accomplishments, fantastic. That's great. So as we talked about a few minutes ago, it's not about the activity. So in this particular case, we're making a pizza, right? Pretty basic. We're making a pizza and here's our dough. Well, that's the activity is we're going to make the pizza and we have a dough, right? So the toppings are actually the accomplishments that we're putting on top of the pizza. And in doing that and in developing those bullets to represent your accomplishments and support your activity, we are using powerful action verbs to describe our accomplishments. So we recruited X number of people. We mentored new team members. We fundraised $1,000 in support of the homeless shelter. We partnered with another club to create a new club, whatever that could look like. We created a new club based on the demand within the school and had 50 members in the first year. So we use powerful action verbs: recruited, partnered, mentored, led, developed, created. All of those go towards developing and talking about what your accomplishments are. So here's an example. A YMCA soccer referee. There's your activity, right? And you could say refereed games, played with kids. All right. Well, we need to make it a little bit more unique. So you learn to negotiate with difficult parents and coaches. Obviously, as a part of that, you're not just, working with the kids, but you also have to interact with parents and other coaches. Manage entire game as the single referee. Okay, that says something. And improve public speaking skills and assertiveness. Well, in order for you to be out, on the field, you're going to have to be able to get your point across and be heard, right? So how do we represent that? Restaurant food service. Learn to multitask in a high pressure environment, train to deal with unpredictable situations. So we could have said delivered food to the table, or we could have said cleaned the table, but we didn't. Instead, we said we had to multitask in a high pressure environment, and we were trained to deal with unpredictable situations as working in a restaurant can present. Varsity tennis. Here's another sport activity which many students have. Picked up an entirely new sport and grew into a very skilled player. Recruited 30% of the team to commit to off-season play. Earned a higher ranking in the lineup through my countless hours training. Now, here's the other thing. Students often have trouble talking about themselves. And it's not just students, it's anybody. If you ask any adult out there, they're going to say the hardest thing they ever had to do was write a resume because nobody likes to talk about themselves. Okay? This is your opportunity to talk about yourself, to show who you are, where you are, how you are. And that is your goal to get across to those on the other end of the computer reading your application. They want to see who you are, what you've done, how you got there, and maybe even what you learned as a part of it. But this is your opportunity to showcase who you are. So here's a couple of other examples. This is the activity, student government, fairly common activity. And if you were to look at this list and you see the highlighted words, they're fairly common words to describe the activity, right? So working with others, meaningful work, commitment, quality relationships, right? Those are fairly common. Okay, how can we look at this differently and create uncommon connections? Okay, well, as a part of student government, you may have differing opinions from others on there in terms of what you should be doing. Okay, well, that's going to require self-control. You may be vulnerable because what you have to say may not be agreed upon by everybody. All right, well, that's another idea. You're going to also need to be adaptable because not everyone's going to agree with you. You're going to have to pivot. You're going to have to do things differently. So there needs to be somebody who's adaptable. You're willing to take risk. Not everything is going to always work, right? You could have a few failures along the way, but you took the risk. Self-discipline, courage, patience. So these are all the same list of words, okay? But we've taken these words and made them a bit more uncommon to describe a relatively common activity. So this is a list of words, and I challenge you to pick one of your activities, okay? And everybody has a piece of paper there, I hope, or in your head, that's fine too. Pick one of your activities and pick 5 words. If you have it in your head, you may not be able to do 10, but pick a few words that you think represent that activity. Okay, so pick 5, pick 10, however many you like. And then take that list of words and cross out the common connections and think about how you can make those connections uncommon, as we described with the student government example. So it may require you to think a little bit outside the box, but by looking at a list of words like this, I think you oftentimes can be a little bit more open-minded in how you describe some of the activities. And it's just about trial and error. Go on the internet and type in synonyms for laughter or type in synonyms for working with others. There's lots of different ways to come up with various words to describe what you're doing. Okay, so here's an example and here's an exercise I would challenge you all to do as you start to develop your activity list. There's 5, I think there's 5 columns here. 5 columns, break those down in bits and pieces. And that's what we do a lot with our students in all of their college planning process, because as a whole, it can be very overwhelming. So we break the process and the planning down into bite-sized pieces. The resume is just one of those pieces. Well, we then take the resume and we break that down into bite-sized pieces. So in doing that, we work with the students to develop those accomplishments and flush out the information. So what I did, you can describe what you did. What did you do? What problems did you solve based on what you listed you did? Were there any lessons that you learned or skills maybe that you gained as a part of that activity? Did you have an impact? And if you did, what was it? And then how you applied what you learned possibly to the next year, the next week, the next person. How did you apply what you learned to yourself? And did you change anything? So a lot of it is introspective in terms of trying to figure out, what you did, how you did it, what impact you had, and if you learned something from it, and can we represent all of those pieces as a part of your resume? And I welcome you to, and I encourage you to write down these 5 sort of columns here and start thinking about what activities you did. And as you look at your list of activities, are there some other things you could maybe research to do? If you feel like, you're not doing something, or maybe there's other things you're interested in doing, or you want to start that Poshmark store, or you want to go work down the street at the food bank, or you want to go work at the YMCA with kids, take a look at what that might look like and how you could go about doing that. But list out your activities and say, okay, this is what I've done. See what else you might be able to figure out. So now's an opportunity for questions. I hope that I've been able to provide, lots of helpful information. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the resume, activities, and things that you might want to, consider as a part of that.
Any questions from anybody? I don't see any listed right now.
Okay.
Robin, is there any certain structure or format that is most beneficial for a college resume?
So the program that we work through, basically my recommendation would be, obviously, have your name at the top, your address, your phone number, your email address. I would also suggest, in reference to the email address, that you use for your college planning purposes, right? You have a school email that you could use, but in addition to that, you may want to create your own separate email that can be used strictly for college related activities. So then, any emails that come in respect to that, where they all are. So that would be one suggestion. Then generally what we do is we list your education. So that would be the name of your school, the location of your school. Depending on GPA, you could list GPA, any awards, any honor societies. You could also list, AP courses or leadership organizations or that kind of thing. And then we move into things like, we break them down into activities, and that could be athletics, that could be volunteer. And then we break it down into work experience, which could be paid or unpaid. So we break it down sort of in those categories. And part of the reason we do it that way is because that's also the way that we can translate it into the Common App, but it also can be manipulated long-term as students gain more experience, add more activities, add more work experience. It's an easy way to add it into that resume. Let's see, how long will be a good for a resume? At this point, depending on how many activities you have and the work you've done, at this point, it's probably about a page. Now, it could go on to a second page, but at the present moment, based on 16, 17, 18, it's probably about a page. Full address with state zip code on the resume, if so, why? That's really kind of up to you. Generally speaking, you could put your city and state. In most cases, if you use a resume program, it'll put in your whole address, but you can limit it to city and state as well. No, the college essay and the resume are different. The resume is a document that lists your activities, awards, honor societies, paid work, extracurricular, all of those pieces that we've talked about. The essay is a personal statement that generally talks about something completely different. Now, it could in fact talk about maybe an activity you have participated in and want to expand further on it. But the essay is could be a 500 to 650 word document that you're digging deeper in terms of that particular activity or an experience or a story that you have. And that would be the essay piece. Colleges want our job resume as well. Generally, you would make it all on one. So you would upload one document as a resume in the Common App. So I would create one document that includes your education and your activities and your employment on one. I hope that answers your question, Kayla. Does unpaid work count as work experience or volunteer work? It really could go, okay, it really could go either way. It depends on the role. It depends on what you've done as a part of that. And so, I think you could look at it and it could go either way. Other questions?
Any other questions for Robin? Those were some great organizers that you shared with students about how they can organize their activity. Mm-hmm. And I also liked the list of descriptions that they could use to enhance the what they're actually. So it's not only the format of the resume, it's actually the words that you're choosing to use on your resume to truly show what you represent and what you've accomplished.
Exactly. Yeah. And what you don't want to do is start a sentence with, I made the tennis team. Like that doesn't show an accomplishment of you as a part of the tennis team, right? So that's why the bullets and that we create under the activity or work or volunteer experience that discusses your accomplishments start with powerful action verbs. So even if someone quickly read through your activities or quickly read through your resume, they could see that you managed, that you led, that you collaborated, you partnered, you won, you planned, you developed. They could quickly see those words to see what you did as a part of your accomplishments. So that's part of the idea, is to get somebody's attention fairly quickly.
And Robin, are there any like free resources out there? I know that you had mentioned Naviance, and I've heard our guidance counselors talk about that there is a framework for a resume on Naviance that our students can access, but are there any other free resources that they could access?
There's lots of different build a resume tools that are out there. It can be as simple as creating a Word document, quite frankly. But there's lots of different resume builder tools that you could use. I think Word has several, and you just start to type in and put the information in the way you want. Or, I always recommend, to be fair, the first thing you do is just sort of develop a bulleted list of activities and write the words that you think you did to those accomplishments are, right? So don't sit down and go, okay, I have to write a resume and I have to really get the bullets right and I have to do all that in one sitting. I just tell everybody to sort of throw up on a piece of paper and put all the activities down that you've done, and then go back and start trying to massage what the accomplishments were as a part of that. Don't try and do it all at one time. So I think that sometimes helps, because you're a little bit more creative if you just throw it all out there. Do you always use awards there? Yes, as opposed to middle school. Is that, Anita, what you mean? I think that's what she means. For the purposes of developing a resume. Yes. Okay. So for the purposes of developing a resume for use in your college applications and beyond, you would list awards that you achieved in high school. Okay. Anything else I can answer for anybody? Excellent.
All right. Thank you very much, Robin.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being with you. Have a nice evening.